What if the President of the United States wasn't just killed by a lone gunman, but by a hidden hand that moves behind the scenes, a shadow government capable of murder in the name of power? What if John F. Kennedy's assassination was the climax of a secret war between the nation's elected leader and the intelligence empire he tried to control? This is not just a story about Dallas. This is a story about betrayal, secrets, and a Cold War chessboard where Kennedy was the ultimate sacrifice. In this video, we'll dive into 5 critical areas that challenge the official narrative and point to something far darker at play. Buckle up, because once you see the pieces on the board, you'll never look at American history the same way again. The Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961 was more than just a botched military operation. It was the spark that ignited open hostility between JFK and the CIA. Designed by the agency under Allen Dulles, the plan aimed to use Cuban exiles to overthrow Fidel Castro. Kennedy, skeptical of the CIA motives and concerned about triggering World War III, refused to authorize direct U.S. air support. The operation failed catastrophically, and the CIA was humiliated. But behind the scenes, this failure may have been a trap. Dulles and his allies never expected the invasion to succeed without U.S. military intervention. They believed Kennedy would cave under pressure once the operation was underway. When he didn't, he sealed his fate. Kennedy was seen as a traitor, not to the country, but to the empire within the country. Allen Dulles, a master manipulator, with deep ties to Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, and even Nazi intelligence assets during and after World War II, saw Kennedy as a threat to everything he stood for. Dulles had shaped the CIA into a rogue power center, one that answered to no one, especially not a young, idealistic president who wanted peace. Kennedy's refusal to be bullied marked a turning point. After the disaster, he famously said he wanted to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. That was not just rhetoric, it was a declaration of war on the shadow government. Dulles was forced to resign, but his network remained firmly intact within the corridors of Langley and beyond. This was the first open act of rebellion. Kennedy was no longer trusted by the security elite. In their eyes, he was soft on communism, unpredictable, and worst of all, he wanted to reduce America's military footprint. That wasn't just naive. It was dangerous to the empire they were building. To understand why Kennedy was killed, you have to understand Allen Dulles. As David Talbot reveals in his book, The Devil's Chessboard, Dulles wasn't just a CIA director. He was a power broker who operated above the law. For decades, Dulles had run covert operations that shaped world governments, overthrew democratically elected leaders, and protected American corporate interests abroad. Dulles saw himself as the guardian of a global order, a new world ruled by elite consensus, not messy democratic processes. JFK threatened that order. After his forced resignation, Dulles didn't fade into the background. He expanded his private network, working with powerful figures in business, intelligence, and the media to undermine Kennedy at every turn. What's most chilling is Dulles' presence after the assassination. Despite being fired by Kennedy, he was appointed to the Warren Commission to investigate the president's death. The man who had every motive to see Kennedy gone was put in charge of shaping the official story. That's not just a conflict of interest, it's a red flag of epic proportions. Talbot paints Dulles as the spider at the center of the web, a man capable of orchestrating a silent coup. He had the connections, the motive, and the psychological detachment necessary to treat a president's murder as just another operation. In Dulles' world, Kennedy was simply a piece that had to be removed from the board. And let's not forget, Dulles had used assassination as a tool before. He had approved plots to kill foreign leaders, including Castro and Lumumba. To think he would draw the line at an American president is naive. In the Cold War, ideology was a weapon, but power was the goal. After the Bay of Pigs, the CIA didn't just retreat, they escalated. Operation Mongoose, another covert program against Castro, was a sprawling campaign of sabotage, subversion, and assassination attempts. While Kennedy allowed it on paper, he privately pushed back. He distrusted the agency's methods and its willingness to start wars in secret. Kennedy's peace overtures to Khrushchev after the Cuban Missile Crisis were seen as appeasement by the hawks. He sought back-channel diplomacy, reduced arms, and even considered pulling out of Vietnam moves that infuriated the Pentagon and CIA leadership. He was breaking the rules of the Cold War game, and that made him a liability. CIA insiders began leaking stories to the press, undermining Kennedy's credibility. They cultivated alliances with anti-Castro Cubans, the mafia, and far-right elements who all felt betrayed by Kennedy. It wasn't a conspiracy of a few, it was a coalition of resentment, forming quietly in the dark. The CIA was also running domestic surveillance operations, even though it was illegal. They monitored JFK, his brother Robert, and civil rights leaders. Files were opened, conversations recorded, and a picture was painted of a presidency out of control. The CIA was creating a justification, a narrative for action. Kennedy knew he was being boxed in. In a 1963 speech at American University, he called for a rethinking of America's Cold War posture, praising the Russian people and advocating for peace. It was bold, it was visionary, and to the shadow state, it was the final straw. Dealey Plaza wasn't just the site of a murder, it was the perfect stage. The security breakdowns, the altered parade route, and the suspicious behavior of Secret Service agents all point to more than incompetence. It looks like an inside job. Kennedy's protection was inexplicably light that day. Even local law enforcement found it strange. Lee Harvey Oswald, the so-called lone gunman, had deep and bizarre connections to intelligence. He had defected to the Soviet Union and then returned without issue. He worked at a facility linked to U.S. military contractors. He associated with anti-Castro Cubans and pro-Castro activists simultaneously. That's not the profile of a radical, it's the profile of an asset. Many believe Oswald was set up, a patsy, as he claimed. His murder by Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with mob ties, silenced him before a trial could ever take place. It was too convenient. Ruby himself hinted at a larger conspiracy, but was quickly dismissed as delusional. The Warren Commission, steered by Dulles, delivered the lone gunman theory. It ignored key witnesses, classified documents, and conflicting medical reports. Dissenting voices were silenced, and the official story became doctrine. But too many pieces didn't fit. From the trajectory of the bullets to the altered autopsy photos, Dallas became a puzzle with forced edges. It wasn't just about who pulled the trigger. It was about who allowed it to happen, and who made sure we never got the full truth. One of the most disturbing revelations in the tangled web of the JFK assassination is the connection between Lee Harvey Oswald and the CIA mind control program MKULTRA. In Tom O'Neill's explosive book, CHAOS, he uncovers a little-known detail. Louis Jolly West, a key figure in the MKULTRA program, visited Jack Ruby after he shot Oswald and may have had prior contact with Oswald himself. West later declared Ruby insane after a single meeting. Was this psychiatry, or was it part of a much deeper cover-up? West wasn't just any doctor. He was a CIA contractor who had conducted experiments on unwitting subjects, including LSD dosing and psychological conditioning under MKULTRA's secret programs. His work focused on how to fracture the human mind, how to erase, implant, or manipulate memories and behaviors. If anyone had the tools to create a patsy or disable a witness, it was Jolly West. There's growing evidence that Oswald may have been targeted for psychological manipulation long before Dallas. His strange defection to the Soviet Union, followed by an even stranger return with no punishment, suggests intelligence handling. He oscillated between pro- and anti-Castro circles, and his fair play for Cuba leaflets were traced to a building housing intelligence-linked organizations. Oswald didn't make sense as a lone actor, but he made perfect sense as someone being used. Then comes the chilling possibility raised by both Tom O'Neill and earlier researchers. Was Oswald being groomed as a fall guy? And was Ruby's killing of Oswald an emergency damage control operation? West's sudden appearance, his access to Ruby, and his history of psychological manipulation cast a shadow over the official narrative. What was really being hidden? If MKULTRA techniques were used to control or confuse Oswald, then his assassination wasn't just a murder, it was a psychological operation. The CIA didn't just run covert wars abroad. It had turned its weapons inward. The creation of a killer, or the illusion of one, was within its grasp. And the truth, as always, was buried under layers of secrecy, plausible deniability, and institutional silence. The death of John F. Kennedy was not just the death of a man. It was the death of an idea that a president could challenge the unelected powers behind the throne and win. Since that day, every leader has known, step too far out of line, and you're expendable. The Vietnam War escalated almost immediately after JFK's death. Despite his desire to withdraw, the Cold War ramped back up. The CIA gained more power, not less. It was as if the brakes Kennedy tried to apply were suddenly released. The machine rolled on. David Talbot's book, The Devil's Chessboard, argues that JFK's murder was the moment the American Republic became a managed democracy, a facade hiding the hand of a permanent ruling class. Elections continued, but the real decisions were made behind closed doors by people you didn't vote for and couldn't remove. We've seen echoes of this ever since. Presidents beholden to intelligence briefings, foreign policy never changing regardless of who's in office, and wars waged without public consent. The secret government doesn't need your approval. It just needs your silence, and maybe that's the scariest part. The truth about JFK's assassination isn't just buried in Dallas. It's buried in our collective willingness to look away. But if we open our eyes, we might finally start asking the right questions, not just about who killed Kennedy, but about who runs America. They called it Camelot, a shining moment of youth, promise, and peace. But Camelot didn't die with a gunshot in Dallas. It was executed by a system that couldn't allow its dream to survive. If JFK had lived, the Cold War might have ended sooner. Vietnam might have been avoided. The intelligence empire might have been dismantled. But that's not the world we live in. We live in the world that was created the moment Kennedy's head was blown back and to the left, the moment the chessboard was cleared, and the king was taken. And now, with evidence from researchers like Tom O'Neill, we see a more sinister dimension. What if Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't just a patsy, but a product? What if psychological warfare tools like MKUltra were used to manipulate him, to shape a narrative, a scapegoat, and ultimately, a lie? Because if the CIA could manufacture assassins, silence witnesses, and erase minds, then the JFK assassination wasn't just a coup. It was a psychological operation against the American people, and we've been living under its spell ever since. The question now isn't whether it happened. It's whether we're brave enough to face what it means. Thanks for watching. If this video opened your eyes, give it a like, share it, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden history of our world. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and never stop questioning the official story.